Chapter 34 of the White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyl. Chapter 34. How the Company made sport in the Vale of Pampeluna. Whilst the council was sitting in Pampeluna, the White Company, having encamped in a neighbouring valley close to the companies of La Nuit and of Black Ortingo, were amusing themselves with sword play, wrestling, and shooting at the shields which they had placed upon the hillside to serve them as butts. The younger archers, with their coats of mail thrown aside, their brown or flaxen hair tossing in the wind, and their jerkins turned back to give free play to their brawny chests and arms, stood in lines, each loosing his shaft in turn, while Johnston, Aylward, Black Simon, and half a score of the elders lounged up and down with critical eyes and a word of rough praise or of curt censure for the marksman. Behind stood knots of Gascon and Brabant crossbowmen from the companies of Ortingo and of La Nuit, leaning upon their unsightly weapons and watching the practice of the Englishmen. "A good shot, Hewett, a good shot," said old Johnston to a young bowman who stood with his bow in his left hand, gazing with parted lips after his flying shaft. "You see, she finds the ring, as I knew she would from the moment that your string twanged." "Loose it easy, steady and yet sharp," said Aylward. "By my hilt, mon gar, it is very well when you do but shoot at a shield, but when there is a man behind the shield, and he rides at you with wave of sword and glint of eyes from behind his visor, you may find him a less easy mark." "It is a mark that I have found before now," answered the young bowman. "And shall again, camarade, I doubt not. But hola, Johnston, who is this who holds his bow like a crow keeper?" "'Tis Silas Peterson of Horsham. Do not wink with one eye and look with the other, Silas, and do not hop and dance after you shoot with your tongue out, for that will not speed it upon its way. Stand straight and firm as God made you. Oh, move not the bow arm, and steady with the drawing hand." "I' faith," said Black Simon, "I am a spearman myself, and am more fitted for hand strokes than for such work as this. Yet I have spent my days among bowmen, and I have seen many a brave shaft sped. I will not say but that we have some good marksmen here, and that this company would be accounted a fine body of archers at any time or place. Yet I do not see any man who bends so strong a bow or shoot as true a shaft as those whom I have known." "You say sooth," said Johnston, turning his seamed and grizzled face upon the man at arms. "See yonder," he added, pointing to a bombard which lay within the camp. "There is what hath done scathe to good bowmanship, with its filthy soot and foolish roaring mouth. I wonder that a true knight, like our prince, should carry such a scurvy thing in his train. Robin, thou red headed lurden, how oft must I tell thee not to shoot straight with a quarter wind blowing across the mark?" "By these 10 finger bones, there were some fine bowmen at the intaking of Calais," said Aylward. "I well remember that on occasion of an outfall a Genoan raised his arm over his mantlet and shook it at us 100 paces from our line. There were 20 who loosed shafts at him. When the man was afterwards slain, it was found that he had taken 18 through his forearm." "And I can call to mind," remarked Johnston, "that when the great cog Christopher, which the French had taken from us, was moored 200 paces from the shore, 2 archers, little Robin Withstaff and Elias Baddlesmere, in 4 shots each cut every strand of her hempen anchor cord, so that she well nigh came upon the rocks." "Good shooting, i' faith, rare shooting," said Black Simon. "But I have seen you, Johnston, and you, Samkin Aylward, and 1 or 2 others who are still with us, shoot as well as the best. Was it not you, Johnston, who took the fat ox at Finsbury Butts against the pick of London town?" A sunburnt and black eyed Brabanter had stood near the old archers, leaning upon a large crossbow and listening to their talk, which had been carried on in that hybrid camp dialect which both nations could understand. He was a squat, bull necked man, clad in the iron helmet, mail tunic, and woollen gambeson of his class. A jacket with hanging sleeves slashed with velvet at the neck and wrists showed that he was a man of some consideration, an under officer or file leader of his company. "I cannot think," said he, "why you English should be so fond of your 6-foot stick. If it amuse you to bend it, well and good; but why should I strain and pull, when my little moulinet will do all for me, and better than I can do it for myself?"
"I have seen good shooting with a prod and with a latch," said Aylward; "but by my hilt, camarade, with all respect to you and your bow, I think that it is but a woman's weapon, which a woman can point and loose as easily as a man."
"I know not about that," answered the Brabanter; "but this I know, that I have served for 14 years, I have never yet seen an Englishman do aught with a longbow which I could not do better with my arbalest. By the three kings, I would even go further, and say that I have done things with my arbalest which no Englishman could do with his longbow."
"Well said, mon gar," cried Aylward. "A good cock has ever a brave call. Now, I have shot little of late, but there is Johnston here who will try a round with you for the honor of the company."
"And I will lay a gallon of Jurason wine upon the longbow," said Black Simon, "though I had rather for my own drinking that it were a quart of Twynham ale." "I take both your challenge and your wager," said the man of Brabant, throwing off his jacket and glancing keenly about him with his black twinkling eyes. "I cannot see any fitting mark, for I care not to waste a bolt upon these shields, which a drunken boor could not miss at a village kermesse."
"This is a perilous man,"
whispered an English man at arms, plucking at Aylward's sleeve.
"He is the best marksman of all the crossbow companies, and it was he who brought down the Constable of Bourbon at Brignais. I fear that your man will come by little honor with him." "Yet I have seen Johnston shoot these 20 years, and I will not flinch from it. How say you, old war hound? Will you not have a flight shot or two with this springald?"
"Tut, tut, Aylward," said the old bowman. "My day is past, and it is for the younger ones to hold what we have gained. I take it unkindly of thee, Samkin, that thou shouldst call all eyes thus upon a broken bowman who could once shoot a fair shaft. Let me feel that bow, Wilkins. It is a Scotch bow, I see, for the upper nock is without and the lower within. By the black rood, it is a good piece of yew, well nocked, well strung, well waxed, and very joyful to the feel. I think that even now that I might hit any large and goodly mark with a bow like this. Turn thy quiver to me, Aylward. I'll have an ash arrow pierced with cornel wood for a roving shaft."
"By my hilt, and so do I," cried Aylward. "These 3 gander wing shafts are such."
"So I see, comrade. It has been my wont to choose a saddle backed feather for a dead shaft, and a swine backed for a smooth flyer. I will take the 2 of them. Ah, Samkin, lad, the eye grows dim and the hand less firm as the years pass." "Come then, are you not ready?" said the Brabanter, who had watched with ill concealed impatience the slow and methodic movements of his antagonist. "I will venture a rover with you, or try long butts or hoyles," said old Johnston. "To my mind the longbow is a better weapon than the arbalest, but it may be ill for me to prove it." "So I think," quoth the other with a sneer. He drew his moulinet from his girdle, and fixing it to the windlass, he drew back the powerful double cord until it had clicked into the catch. Then from his quiver he drew a short thick quarrel, which he placed with the utmost care upon the groove. Word had spread of what was going forward, and the rivals were already surrounded, not only by the English archers of the Company, but by hundreds of arbalestiers and men at arms from the bands of Ortingo and La Nuit, to the latter of which the Brabanter belonged. "There is a mark yonder on the hill," said he. "Mayhap you can discern it."
"I see something," answered Johnston, shading his eyes with his hand, "but it is a very long shoot."
"A fair shoot, a fair shoot. Stand aside, Arnaud, lest you find a bolt through your gizzard. Now, comrade, I take no flight shot, and I give you the vantage of watching my shaft." As he spoke he raised his arbalest to his shoulder, and was about to pull the trigger when a large gray stork flapped heavily into view, skimming over the brow of the hill, and then soaring up into the air to pass the valley. Its shrill and piercing cries drew all eyes upon it, and as it came nearer A dark spot which circled above it resolved itself into a peregrine falcon, which hovered over its head, poising itself from time to time, and watching its chance of closing with its clumsy quarry. Nearer and nearer came the two birds, all absorbed in their own contest, the stork wheeling upwards, the hawk still fluttering above it, until they were not 100 paces from the camp. The Brabanter raised his weapon to the sky, and there came the short, deep twang of his powerful string. His bolt struck the stork just where its wing meets the body, and the bird whirled aloft in a last convulsive flutter before falling wounded and flapping to the earth. A roar of applause burst from the crossbowmen, but at the instant that the bolt struck its mark, old Johnston, who had stood listlessly with arrow on string, bent his bow and sped a shaft through the body of the falcon. Whipping the other from his belt, he sent it skimming some few feet from the earth with so true an aim that it struck and transfixed the stork for the second time ere it could reach the ground. A deep chested shout of delight burst from the archers at the sight of this double feat, and Aylward, dancing with joy, threw his arms round the old marksman and embraced him with such vigor that their mail tunics clanged again. "Ah, comrade!" he cried, "you shall have a stoop with me for this. What then, old dog? Would not the hawk please thee, but thou must have the stork as well? Oh, to my heart again!" "It is a pretty piece of yew, and well strung," said Johnston, with a twinkle in his deep set gray eyes. "Even an old broken bowman might find the clout with a bow like this." "You have done very well," remarked the Brabanter in a surly voice, "but it seems to me that you have not yet shown yourself to be a better marksman than I, for I have struck that at which I aimed. By the three kings, no man can do more." "It would ill beseem me to claim to be a better marksman," answered Johnston, "for I have heard great things of your skill. I did but wish to show that the long bow could do that which an arbalest could not do, for you could not, with your moulinet, have your string ready to speed another shaft ere the bird dropped to the earth." "In that you have the vantage," said the crossbowman. "By St. James, it is now my turn to show you where my weapon has the better of you. I pray you to draw a flight shaft with all your strength down the valley, that we may see the length of your shoot." "That is a very strong prod of yours," said Johnston, shaking his grizzled head as he glanced at the thick arch and powerful strings of his rival's arbalest. "I have little doubt that you can overshoot me, and yet I have seen bowmen who could send a cloth yard arrow further than you could speed a quarrel." "So I have heard," remarked the Brabanter, "and yet it is a strange thing that these wondrous bowmen are never where I chance to be. Pace out the distances with a wand at every 5 score, and do you, Arnaud, stand at the 5th wand to carry back my bolts to me." A line was measured down the valley, and Johnston, drawing an arrow to the very head, sent it whistling over the row of wands. "Bravely drawn! A rare shoot!" shouted the bystanders. "It is well up to the 4th mark." "By my hilt, it is over it!" cried Aylward. "I can see where they have stooped to gather up the shaft." "We shall hear anon," said Johnston quietly, and presently a young archer came running to say that the arrow had fallen 20 paces beyond the 4th wand. "400 paces and a score!" cried Black Simon. "I' faith, it is a very long flight. Yet wood and steel may do more than flesh and blood." The Brabanter stepped forward with a smile of conscious triumph, and loosed the cord of his weapon. A shout burst from his comrades as they watched the swift and lofty flight of the heavy bolt. "Over the 4th!" groaned Aylward. "By my hilt, I think that it is well up to the 5th." "It is over the 5th!" cried a Gascon loudly, and a comrade came running with waving arms to say that the bolt had pitched 8 paces beyond the mark of the 500. "Which weapon hath the vantage now?" cried the Brabanter, strutting proudly about with shouldered arbalest amid the applause of his companions. "You can overshoot me," said Johnston gently. "Or any other man who ever bent a long bow," cried his victorious adversary. "Nay, not so fast," said a huge archer, whose mighty shoulders and red head towered high above the throng of his comrades. "I must have a word with you ere you crow so loudly. Where is my little popper?
By sainted Dick of Hampole, it will be a strange thing if I cannot outshoot that little thing of thine, which to mine eyes is more like a rat trap than a bow. Will you try another flight, or do you stand by your last?"
508 paces will serve my turn," answered the Brabanter, looking askance at this new opponent.
"Tut, John," whispered Aylward, "you never were a marksman. Why must you thrust your spoon into this dish?" "Easy and slow, Aylward. There are very many things which I cannot do, but there are also one or two which I have the trick of. It is in my mind that I can beat this shoot, if my bow will but hold together."
"Go on, old babe of the woods! Have at it, Hampshire!" cried the archers, laughing.
"By my soul, you may grin," cried John, "but I learned how to make the long shoot from old Hob Miller of Milford."
He took up a great black bow as he spoke, and sitting down upon the ground, he placed his 2 feet on either end of the stave. With an arrow fitted, he then pulled the string towards him with both hands until the head of the shaft was level with the wood. The great bow creaked and groaned, and the cord vibrated with the tension.
"Who is this fool's head who stands in the way of my shoot?" said he, craning up his neck from the ground.
"He stands on the further side of my mark," answered the Brabanter, "so he has little to fear from you."
"Well, the saints assoil him!" cried John, "though I think he is over near to be scathed."
As he spoke, he raised his 2 feet with the bow stave upon their soles, and his cord twanged with a deep rich hum which might be heard across the valley. Then the measurer in the distance fell flat upon his face, and then jumping up again, he began to run in the opposite direction. "Well shot, old lad! It is indeed over his head," cried the bowman.
"Mon Dieu!"
exclaimed the Brabanter. "Who ever saw such a shoot?"
"It is but a trick," quoth John. "Many a time have I won a gallon of ale by covering a mile in 3 flights down Wilverley Chase."
"It fell 130 paces beyond the 5th mark," shouted an archer in the distance. 630 paces! Mon Dieu, but that is a shoot! And yet it says nothing for your weapon, mon gros camarade, for it was by turning yourself into a crossbow that you did it."
"By my hilt, there is truth in that," cried Aylward. "And now, friend, I will myself show you a vantage of the longbow. I pray you to speed a bolt against yonder shield with all your force. It is an inch of elm with a bull's hide over it."
"I scarce shot as many shafts at Brignais," growled the man of Brabant, "though I found a better mark there than a cantle of bull's hide. But what is this, Englishman? The shield hangs not 100 paces from me, and a blind man could strike it." He screwed up his string to the furthest pitch and shot his quarrel at the dangling shield. Aylward, who had drawn an arrow from his quiver, carefully greased the head of it and sped it at the same mark.
"Run, Wilkins," quoth he, "and fetch me the shield."
Long were the faces of the Englishmen, and broad the laugh of the crossbowmen, as the heavy mantlet was carried towards them, for there in the centre was a thick Brabant bolt driven deeply into the wood, while there was neither sign nor trace of the cloth-yard shaft. "By the 3 kings!" cried the Brabanter, "this time at least there is no gainsaying which is the better weapon, or which the truer hand that held it. You have missed the shield, Englishman."
Tarry a bit, mon gar,"
quoth Aylward, and turning round the shield he showed a round clear hole in the wood at the back of it.
"My shaft has passed through it, camarade, and I trow the one which goes through is more to be feared than the one which bides on the way."
The Brabanter stamped his foot with mortification, and was about to make some angry reply, when Alleyne Edricson came riding up to the crowds of archers. "Sir Nigel will be here soon," said he, "and it is his wish to speak with the company." In an instant order and method took the place of general confusion. Bows, steel caps, and jacks were all caught up from the grass. A long cordon cleared the camp of all strangers, while the main body fell into 4 lines, with under officers and file leaders in front and on either flank. So they stood silent and motionless when their leader came riding towards them, his face shining and his whole small figure swelling with the news which he bore. "Great honor has been done to us, men," cried he, "for of all the army the prince has chosen us out, that we should ride onwards into the lands of Spain to spy on our enemies. Yet, as there are many of us, and as the service may not be to the liking of all, I pray that those will step forward from the ranks who have the will to follow me." There was a rustle among the bowmen. When Sir Nigel looked up at them, no man stood forward from his fellows, but the four lines of men stretched unbroken as before. Sir Nigel blinked at them in amazement, and a look of deepest sorrow shadowed his face. "That I should live to see the day!" he cried. "What, not one?" "My fair lord," whispered Alleyne, "they have all stepped forward." "Ah, by St. Paul! I see how it is with them. I could not think that they would desert me. We start at dawn to morrow, and ye are to have the horses of Sir Robert Cheney's company. Be ready, I pray thee, at early cockcrow." A buzz of delight burst from the archers as they broke their ranks and ran hither and thither, whooping and cheering like boys who have news of a holiday. Sir Nigel gazed after them with a smiling face, when a heavy hand fell upon his shoulder. "What ho, my knight errant of Twynham!" said a voice. "You are off to Ebro, I hear, and by the holy fish of Tobias you must take me under your banner." "What, Sir Oliver Buttesthorn!" cried Sir Nigel. "I had heard that you were come into camp, and had hoped to see you. Glad and proud shall I be to have you with me." "I have a most particular and weighty reason for wishing to go," said the sturdy knight. "I can well believe it," returned Sir Nigel. "I have met no man who is quicker to follow where honor leads." "Nay, it is not for honor that I go, Nigel." "For what then?" "For pullets." "Pullets?" "Yes, for the rascal vanguard had cleared every hen from the country side. It was this very morning that Norbury, my squire, lamed his horse in riding round in quest for one, for we have a bag of truffles and naught to eat with them. Never have I seen such locusts as this vanguard of ours. Not a pullet shall we see until we are in front of them. So I shall leave my Winchester renegades to the care of the provost marshal, and I shall hie south with you, Nigel, with my truffles at my saddle bow." "Oliver, Oliver, I know you over well," said Sir Nigel, shaking his head, and the two old soldiers rode off together to their pavilion. CHAPTER 34.